everybody, and welcome back to my channel. It's Russell with Ink and Paper Blog. How are you all doing today? Hunter and I are back. We are back. We have read the National Book Award long list for fiction, and we have opinions. Thank you, Hunter, for coming on back.
Thank you for having me.
So Hunter and I actually live on opposite coasts. So there is a 3-hour time gap whenever we try to record. And normally we record during the week, and I do it right after work, and Hunter's at 8 o'clock at night. But today it's both the middle of the day.
Yeah, which is, it's really funny because like I feel like it's normally got to be like a pain for you because you're like you don't have time to come down for work, and my bedtime is extremely early because I go to bed at like 8:30 lately. So
yeah, no, I always feel, but we have such good conversations and energy, so there you go. I have to tell you, Hunter, I sort of feel like, have you ever read a long list and thought, oh, all of these judges were literally thinking, what will Russell out in California really like? I loved all of these books.
Yeah. This was an impressive long list, I think.
All of them have so many merits and are pretty exciting, and I'm so glad some of like the lesser known books wound up on people's radars.
Yeah. I want to ask very quickly, this is very like off, but like, do you have a favorite year, like a year that like was like just made for you think?
Well, I have to say this year, I told my husband when I was reading these, I was like, every one of these books I am loving. There's always been a year where there's been like one book or two books that I've just been like, ugh, maybe. I will say the short list, the year that Jesmyn Ward won for
Sing Unburied Sing.
Sing Unburied Sing. I thought that was a fantastic short list. Mm-hmm. But most of the time there's usually like one book on the long list or two that I'm like, not really my thing.
Yeah.
This year, I was like, so many first person storytelling, which is totally my jam. Mm-hmm. So many like epic time, learning about people over a long period of time. Love that. So how about you? What's your favorite year?
2015, which had Lauren Groff's Fates and Furies, Hanya Yanagihara's A Little Life, Angela Florney's The Turner House. It had Rebecca Bender, Refund, and it also had one more that The Winner, Fortune Smiles by Adam Johnson. So one that you can remember that is amazing to me. I mean, I can barely remember what I had for breakfast. So that you remember that entire short list. So I, this is a total aside, we need to get into this pile of books, but I met Adam Johnson at a book event for The Orphan Master's Son 3 months before he won the Pulitzer. And he actually teaches at Stanford here in California, so he's very easy to see. He is such a lovely, lovely person. And he signed my book, and we became friends on Facebook. And I was like, oh, this really nice guy that wrote this little book. The next thing I know, he wins the Pulitzer. Yeah. He's very kind. He signed I went to meet him for Fortune Smiles, and he thought it was very funny. And I remember because I told him what my favorite stories were and why. And he just said, he's like, I can tell you really actually enjoy reading. And I don't know why, but someone saying that to me made me start crying because I was like, thank you. Yes, I do.
Yeah, you know what I have found? 95% of the time, authors are really good, nice people. And you talk to them about their work and they're amazing. So, okay. Hunter, without further ado, what we're going to do today, y'all, is Hunter and I are going to we're not going to summarize plots. We've already sort of done that in the last video. What we are going to do today is sort of talk about why we think this book made the long list, and if we think it has a legitimate chance to make the short list. So that's going to be our go-to. And so we're going to just do alphabetical order by author and go from there. Okay. And let's start with one of the biggest books on the list.
Cloud Cuckoo Land by Anthony Doerr, out from Scribner. Why do you think this one made the list, Hunter?
I think that the same reasons why All the Light We Cannot See did, as far as he's just a really talented writer, and he writes characters that they feel very alive, and his stories are very captivating. He has a really strong voice. And I think that specifically this year, I think that he kind of made something that's like very it feels like he conquered something in some way with how he was able to tackle this beast of a book, and kind of, I don't know, it's just very impressive.
I will say that to me, this is the most, it's very unique on this list. It's the only one that sort of has this sort of weird time travel-ish type of idea, and then this connected big epic arc of these three very different time periods, and it all resolves so beautifully, which could have gone completely awry.
Yeah.
And in his very deft hands, it doesn't. It just doesn't. It's just so well done, and it's so different. It's so different than All the Light We Cannot See. Like, I think that also helps it. It's just such a different book.
Yeah, I will say it was not my favorite on the list, and it was very out of my wheelhouse, but I ended up really enjoying it, and I thought it was really great on audio.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, and he's such a great, amazing person too. Did you hear about these placards he was putting in his books? So he put, I don't know, it's like 100 placards in books and sent them to all these different independent bookstores. And if you find one, you win $100 gift card to that bookstore.
Ah,
right?
I love that.
Yes. So then that made me love him even more. So, do you think this one has a good chance of making the short list?
I think it could. And I will say, I think this book has a lot of commercial appeal. I've recommended it to a lot of people I know who maybe wouldn't read other books on the list, but I knew would really like this one.
Yeah, and I think this one also is a lot of these books don't have like that traditional sort of plot. Mm-hmm. This one's more plot, and so people can really just sort of dive into the storytelling.
Yeah.
And again, it is so well done.
Yeah. I mean, I can see the reason why he's so highly regarded, for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So I do think that my thing is, will we see 2 Pulitzer Prize winning authors on the short list? I'm not sure, but I definitely think this book deserves to be on the short list.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess we should talk about your friend.
It's so funny. I can tell I'm biased because I don't even know. I could read, Lauren Groff could give me somebody else's book and just write her name over it, and I'd be like, wow, greatest thing ever written. Perfect.
So I think this one made the short list because I just think that Lauren Groff can tell an amazing story. Like, who knew she was going to pick nuns from the 1100s to tell an epic feminist woman empowering narrative? Like, it was so out of the box, but it was very, very well done.
You know what, I think so. I can tell. It's funny, actually. I feel like because I've kind of gone down the rabbit hole of like researching so much about her, I could see, just knowing her. I act like we're friends. We are friendly. We are friendly. We have talked many times, but we are not like BFFs. But one day. But I wasn't so surprised by this, just because she takes these like MOOC classes online that are like, and she had taken a lot on that period of time, and I knew about her studying French and going and studying in France in France at one point. I knew like her history of all that, and so I was like, okay, this makes sense. And I also think that I could see, it's so funny because I think that the same inspirations for Fates and Furies, which were Virginia Woolf's To the Lighthouse and Middlemarch, those are 2 influences for her. I could see them clearly here too, because she's captured that really precise wisdom that she's able to like really catch, she has such a good turn of phrase for like for everything, and that was there. And then the brevity, which is something that reminded me of the second section of To the Lighthouse, Time Passes, with those little bracketed sections where it's these people's lives, and she does that here too. I mean, this book like moves at such a fast pace, and so I think that's, yeah.
I agree. I think for me, and this is sort of what happens sometimes when an author is so good, you compare it to the other books that you love by them, right?
Mhm.
And I think this book is fantastic. I think everyone should read it. I think Florida, I think Fates and Furies are stronger books.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
The end of this one was a little wonky to me. I felt like she didn't know exactly how she wanted to sort of wrap it up. And it ends fine, but I was just like, oh, I just felt such satisfaction at the end of Fates and Furies.
Yeah.
I mean, Lauren Groff is a phenomenal writer, and I wouldn't be surprised if this one made the short list, but I will say of all her last 3 books, to me, this is maybe the one where I'm like, if it didn't, I wouldn't also be surprised. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm rooting for her because I think she deserves it because she's fantastic. But I loved this book, but it just wasn't my favorite Lauren Groff.
No, this to me felt like if I will say this, if she won, it would feel very much like the Elizabeth Taylor Butterfield 8 Oscar, which is like, it's like, okay, well, it's maybe not the one that she deserves it for, but we're gonna give it to her anyway because she deserves it. So
yeah. The thing is, she's still so young, so I really think she's going to have plenty of opportunity to win this award and a Pulitzer, I'm sure. Who knows? I never can guess what the Pulitzer is going to feel one day. Every year I'm like, what? So, but really amazing book, really well worth the time. I actually listened to that on audio as I read it, and it is a fantastic audio as well. So highly recommend it. I'm not putting it on my short list. It's just right outside the short list because I just like some other books more. I think there are some masterpieces in this stack. So that's sort of where I stand with it. But still, Lauren Groff, you should read everything she's written.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think a book that surprised both of us was Abundance by Jakob Guanzon, out from Graywolf Press. I didn't expect this to do what it did to me.
Let me tell you, I will say this, that book captures such a specific feeling of anxiety and grief, and I mean, I think I described it as oxygen stealing in my review, because it feels like it is like pulling the oxygen from your lungs, like it is.
And we talked a bit about this a little bit before we started. I haven't and this is the reason this book is on the short list in my opinion, I mean on the long list in my opinion. I haven't read something that does this father-son dynamic with this poverty. Like, the poverty issues in this book are so tangible and heartbreaking. And as things happen to this son and this father, you sort of feel like, yep, that's going to be their life. Like, they don't have a way to get out of this, and it breaks your heart.
Yeah, it is one of those where it's actually funny. I thought I was going to cry at several points. I did not cry, but I think it's only because there is a lot of restraint where I think he could have been emotionally manipulative, and he does kind of like pull back where it's necessary, and I appreciated that.
It's a debut.
Yeah.
It's an impressive debut.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I thought that the whole idea of like the chapter starting with the money that was in the guy's bank account was very clever.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. I appreciate there were aspects to the overall structure of the narrative that reminded me of some short stories I've read. And so it was interesting to kind of see that. And I think it actually, in some ways, I feel like it does read like a short story. I think it could have I think I like that it is a novel, but I think it also could have worked really well as just like a longer short story. But it was interesting to kind of see, um, I don't know, it's just interesting to see that structure and kind of be familiar with how it plays out in a shorter structure and kind of see that in a longer form.
Yeah. I will say I'm not sure that it's strong enough to make the short list, only because it's such a strong year. But it's definitely a book, and he is definitely an author to take notice of.
I think, honestly, I think that if anything's possibly going to hold it back, it might be because it's all the timeline, it kind of alternates between, you know, like this really like fast, like this, like, you know, because it's you're leading up to this one moment in the book, and then it kind of goes to the backstory. It kind of alternates, but I think the backstory sections were interesting, but sometimes it kind of blunted the momentum just a little bit for me, and I think
Yeah.
that could be a thing that kind of holds it back.
Yeah, that's actually a very excellent point. So, okay, moving on. I realized last time you and I talked for almost an hour about this, so we can definitely talk about books. So I'm like, Russell, keep yourself, because just we got to keep it going. So, Zorrie by Laird Hunt is one of the books that I didn't know anything about when the list came out. You know, and I believe that this is a masterpiece. This is a story of one woman's life. It is very Virginia Woolf, Mrs. Dalloway, though over a longer period of time. It has a very Marilyn Robinson sort of cadence to it. And it's beautiful. It's heartbreaking. You fall for Zorrie and you are just taken on a ride. This may be my favorite book on the long list.
Okay.
Because this is a Russell book. I love books about older women looking back on their lives. I need zero to none plot. Like, I don't need it. But did you have any feelings about this one now that you've thought about it a little bit?
I do like this one. It reminds me of there's a book that came out, I think it was called The Boat Builder, that was on one of the long lists.
Yes, Daniel something. I can't remember his last name.
Yeah, it was from McSweeney's, and it's one of those where I actually went back and reread The Boat Builder like a year later and loved it. This is one where I recognized that if I was reading it outside of this space, I would have just like swooned over it. But I think that, you know, when we're reading these books and we're thinking like really critically about every aspect, I think this is one that I was a little bit harder on. Not because, and the thing is, it's not even like for any, like I don't have any real criticisms. It's just one of those books where, this is a year where everything is it's so strong, and so, and I won't say in your face, but everything does feel very, like this one is a very quiet.
Yes.
Didn't you say like I feel like somebody said Elizabeth Strout, and I can also
Oh, very much, very much.
which I also love. I think because I think a lot about Lucy Barton, and I think that this kind of, you know, and I love it. And that's the thing too. This is one. It's so funny because I know if I'd read this before the long list came out, I'd have been like, oh, this needs to be on the long list for sure. And like now I'm like being like critical for no reason, because I'm just
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. I think it may be too quiet. It's in a big stack of very loud books, and I think that may be its holdback, but it's made me obsessed with him, and I am utterly in love with that book. It will be on my top favorite reads of the year, hands down. I don't know that it will make the short list. I think that there's just too many other ones going on, which I think we're about to get into a bunch of the ones that I think have a lot of chance here. But yeah, but I loved it. So let's talk about the other book that you literally picked to be on this long list, and I didn't know what to do with it. And I read it, and this also to me was a masterpiece. And that's Intimacies by Katie Kitamura. Am I saying her last name right?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. This book is fantastic.
Yeah. It is. She is a genius. Like, I'm convinced. Like, I will say, it's so funny. I feel like blasphemous, but I think Lauren Groff would agree. Like, I think this is one of my top 3 on the list, on the long list.
Absolutely.
I mean, every single, I mean, her economy of language, her understanding of character and plot and world. I mean, I'm mind blown. So good.
And the complexity of the narrative in so few pages. Like, there is a definite arc for this young woman that stands at the center, and it goes all over the place, but feels so purposeful.
Yeah.
All on the backdrop of the Hague, which is like this, its own character in the novel. Which I felt was just absolutely brilliant. I just think this is one of those books that you need to do with a book club, and you then need the book club to be 3 hours long, because you are going to talk about so much of this book.
Would you be happy if this one won?
I would be totally happy if this one won. This is definitely in my top 3 to win. If actually, it's probably in my top 2 to win if I have to narrow it down.
Yeah, I think same.
Yes. And it's just, I don't know what it is about this book, but I want to hand it to everybody and go, if you are a reader, you'll love this. If you're a writer, learn from this.
Yeah.
You know, because there's just, I think, so much to it.
Yeah.
It's brilliant.
I completely agree.
Okay. So I will say that the next book on this list is the one that probably, it took me forever to read this book. And that is The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois by Honorée Fanonne Jeffers. All I'll say is I posted my picture of this book, and she said thank you on Twitter and retweeted, and I almost cried because she's an Oprah, like her book is an Oprah book. She has no need to even be looking at my tweet, you know? And but I was just like, oh my gosh, she actually saw this. That's fantastic. This book is so good. Yeah. It is so long, but it is so, like, the narrative pushes you along. Yeah. And for me, this book is on the long list for 2 reasons. One, it is an American story through and through. And it tells so much about our history that I just don't feel like often makes it into the narrative. And 2, it has this structure where we're getting like this modern day novel about this young woman in her life. And then these sort of like interwoven oral history pieces that start with the Creek Indians and then like go through this entire lineage of this family, connecting so many pieces together so beautifully.
Yeah. I mean, I think somebody said it's one of those like once in a decade books. There was some review that said that, and I think that's very true.
Yeah, yeah. And I feel like it will speak to so many people. Mm-hmm. I do feel it's fair, I have to say, big trigger warnings for sexual assault and sexual abuse and rape. There is a lot of it in this book. And even I'm not like triggered, but by the end of it, there was a sense of exhaustion because it was so emotional to me. So I will warn people about that. It is, I do think, a bit long. I do think there are some parts of this novel that could be taken out and it still be equally as powerful.
I will say that is about 3 pages in, that was I thought, oh, this is a book that will be able to be edited down. But I also think that in the same token, I think that sometimes it's kind of like that. I don't know how to describe it, but there's something about the conversational, the way it's written. I think that what could be edited out is also the thing that makes it so readable.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. But I mean, I don't often go in for an 800-page book. Like, I just don't do that. But in this case, I would totally tell people, like, this is a story that will take you away. And if you are looking to lose yourself and you just want to watch someone who has a brilliant control of language, you know, you can tell that she's a poet, right? You can 100% tell she's a poet. Yeah. So I definitely think this book will make the short list. I think there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I will be shocked if it doesn't.
Yeah.
But I want people to read it, and Oprah told people to read it, so clearly people are going to read it. But
no, but it's like, it is definitely a book that I think everyone will. I don't think it's an unforgettable kind of read for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. Oh, it's so interesting you should say that, because now we're going to talk about The Prophets by Robert Jones Jr. Why do you think this one is on the short list? I mean, the long list. I keep saying the short list, the long list.
It's so funny. I reread my review of it recently, and when I finished, I was very smitten with this book. I thought it was so amazing, and I still think it's amazing. But I said this last time, it has not had as much staying power with me as I thought it would.
Yes.
And so I think it is a very strong book. I think that, I mean, it's like it was a 5-star read for me. It was, I love so much about it. I think that, well, I will also say I'm very surprised. I was surprised initially, and I'm still surprised by some of the comparisons. Specifically, like I know why they're saying like James Baldwin and Toni Morrison, but I think that I think sometimes people just like pick. I think this happens a lot with I noticed this a lot with Black authors, where publishers are like, oh, we're just gonna put two like other like big name like Black authors on this book to sell it, and I'm like, no, like do your research and like actually know what these books are being like what they're comparable to. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like sometimes I think publishing gets lazy, but anyway.
I do think that anytime you compare any author's debut to a Baldwin or a Morrison, you almost set it up for a bit of a letdown, because there's just, those two are iconic, right? I totally agree with you. I think that this is a book, when I read it, it's the first book I read in 2021. I adored it. 5-star read, absolutely loved it. It hasn't had the staying power. And the more I think about it, I feel like it does feel more like a debut to me. There's a couple of sections that feel a little wedged into the narrative that I don't think are completely necessary, but I could see what he was trying to do. But it is brimming with talent. Like, Robert Jones Jr. is talented, and his sense of style, if you don't follow him, he has got a great personal sense of style.
No, yeah. And it's, I think we said this too last time. He's one of those people where I will be so excited to see what else he comes up with.
Absolutely. And kudos to him thinking that he had never seen a narrative about gay Black men placed in this time period. So, as Toni Morrison says, can't find the book you want, write it, right? That is a total awful paraphrase. He did exactly what she said to do, and kudos to him. He does it very, very well. Yeah. I don't know that this is a strong enough book to make it to the short list, though.
Yeah, I don't see this one on the short list now.
Yeah, it will be interesting. So we only have 3 books left. Look at this, we're flying through.
Better than that, yeah. Okay.
So The Souvenir Museum by Elizabeth McCracken is the only short story collection on the list, which is in itself unique, because there's usually 2 at least.
Yeah.
So one, Elizabeth McCracken also retweets and says thank you for reading your books, and she is absolutely lovely. And this is a fantastic short story collection about loss and love, and figuring out what relationships should be or shouldn't be, and sort of taking your time with them. And there's connected short stories through this book that I think are the strongest parts of it. I definitely followed that narrative and those characters and really, really loved it. It's such a year of the novel to me that I'm not sure it's a strong enough collection to beat out the novels, but I definitely think if you're a short story reader, this is a fantastic book.
Yeah, this is not, I really did. I liked the stories. I think that it's really great, but I did not, it's so funny actually, because I get on people all the time whenever they're like, oh, but this book, I know it wasn't technically as good, but it had more heart. And like, I know people get so annoyed because I'm always the one who's critical of that. But I will say there were other story collections that I thought they resonated with me so much more deeply that I thought could have made the list. And so I think that that's kind of in my mind about like with the short stories. So I don't know.
Yeah.
This was when I was.
It's a great collection, and I always struggle really hard to sort of talk about short stories because they're so disconnected. How do you sort of talk about them, you know, all of them and encompass what it says? But she has a way with words. She has a way with people. She has a way with like just the loss or the sense of loss is really tangible in this book. And it touched my heart. There was 2 stories that I kind of got teary-eyed just because I think that she does such a wonderful job. Highly, highly recommend it. It's very good.
Yeah, it is good. I'm like I said, I'm just being like, I'm being overly critical because I feel like I have to be like, you know, like,
well, you know, it was funny. We did this video last year and people were like, you guys didn't say enough. You didn't have enough opinions. So this year we have all these opinions. But we keep going back to, this is a phenomenal list of books. So take everything in stride. All of these books should be read by everybody. So this is the book that I definitely would never have thought before it started was going to make the short list, but I have really, really strong feelings about Hell of a Book by Jason Mott.
Yeah.
You just reviewed this one.
Not yet.
Not yet. Oh, we talked about it.
Yeah, we talked about it. This to me is like, in some weird ways, like, hear me out, but like, this has a lot of commercial appeal in the way that Fleischman is in Trouble.
Okay.
Do you know, it's one of those books where like, I know it has like that kind of propulsive like stuff that, you know, you kind of tear through it that same way.
Yeah. Well, in this book, I mean, I think there are 2 things about it that why it's on this long list is, one, it's very timely. You know, it deals with police brutality. It deals with the loss of many, many Black men and women to police brutality. And how do you deal with that? How do people move on from that? From a really unique angle. And then again, structurally, it's very, very clever, telling you 2 very different stories that by the end, when everything sort of is, Jason says, this is what you should recognize. You're like, oh my gosh, I need to start over. Because now I'm like, it all makes sense.
Yeah.
But this book has a lot of heart too. It's very heart-wrenching at times.
There's like, and also this is another one where the audiobook is very well performed.
Yes.
Because there were several times where I was like, I was like, this is the second time this has happened where I was like, I do this a lot where I'll be in my car listening and I'll like be sobbing and someone will catch me sobbing, and then I'm having to be like, I'm sorry, don't let me. And that was one of the books.
Well, and this is one of those things where you have such a complicated main character where at times you don't like him, like he has some flaws that are frustrating, but as you start to learn about him, you realize maybe there are pieces to the puzzle, and that can become very heavy-handed to me. Sometimes, you know, an author will be like, the reason he's this way is blah, and like just slap you in the face with it. Jason does not do that. He definitely he brings you along on a very emotional ride.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I've read a lot of books lately, and this book deals with it too, about like colorism within the Black community. Mm-hmm. You know, the love songs of W.E.B. Bois has it in it. This book, The Vanishing Half, you know, and Passing, which is one of my favorite classics of all time, which is about to become a movie that I can not wait to see. Probably the book that I think in my head when I think about the first one, but that theme and the talking about it, and even within the Black community, is powerfully dissected in this book.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I do think this will make the short list.
I do too. I think it's strong enough, and it's funny because like I think it is like so deceptively just, it's like so smart. Like you don't, yes. I think because it's so readable and conversational, like the narrative is and everything, you don't realize just how smart it is until you're like really in it, and then you're like, oh wow, okay, like we are in very capable hands in every way.
Yeah. Well, and I think that if we talk about another overall theme of this long list, we were in capable hands in every one of these books.
Yeah.
all of these authors were doing something with intention and doing it well.
Yeah.
So I said I had 2 books that I thought could possibly win. And the last book on this list is the other one I think has a excellent chance. And that's Bewilderment by Richard Powers.
Yeah.
This book has gotten some interesting reviews, to be honest.
Very divisive.
Yes. I loved this book, Hunter.
Yeah. Well, I think I said this before in our last, where I wasn't even looking forward to this one. I was kind of like pushing to the side because I thought I was gonna hate it. And then I started it and I was like, oh no. I was like, I'm really invested and I'm like emotionally invested. I'm like, I thought it was so good. That was my first Richard Powers, and I was like, how on earth have I just gone this whole time? Like,
I know. I just it's hard to say why it's on the long list without, for me, it's almost spoilerish, but I'll say it's just like, it's a father and son story that is so complicated, but so heartbreaking and real to me. Like, I think a lot of people dissect this book because there's this sort of discussion about the scientific method to fix this child who's having emotional issues and after the passing of his mom. And to me, like, that was so secondary to just this father's undying desire to help his son.
Yeah.
And then this other story of the youth recognizing what we're doing to our planet and the adults being completely dismissive.
Yeah.
So.
I think it's so, I think I said this in my review where I said, like, there's a lot that I don't get about this book because my brain has just not been in a place to process anything anymore. But this was a book where I think even if you don't get like some of like the bigger themes, just strictly on a storytelling like level, like you can have such, it's so good.
It is, and I read one other Richard Powers all the way through, and I did not make it through the overstory. But this was the first time I've read him and thought, this man has my heart in his hand.
Yeah.
And I was scared that he was going to squeeze it. And I was like, don't do it to me. Don't do it. And it's just a brilliantly beautiful book.
Yes. That is one I expect to see on the short list for sure.
I do too. I mean, we talked about this briefly. I think it is probably also a favorite to win the Booker. It's on the Booker short list. It has a very Booker feel to it. But I am so glad it made it on this list because I don't know if I would have read it otherwise.
Could you imagine if a book won the Booker and the National Book Award and the Pulitzer? Could you imagine?
Well, I mean, when Colson Whitehead won the Pulitzer for The Underground Railroad and the National Book Award, I mean, I remember that being like, whoa, that's a big, that's why when Jasmine Moore didn't win the Pulitzer for Unburied Sing and Les won that year, I almost stopped following the Pulitzer.
I was very angry about that. Listen, I am still so, because it wasn't even on the long list, was it? It wasn't even on the long list.
No, it wasn't even on the long list.
See, we cannot, the Pulitzer canceled until further notice.
And we could do a whole conversation about my feelings about Les, but we will not do that. It would do no good. So, Hunter, if you had to pick your 2 competing favorites to win the National Book Award at this point, not knowing what the shortlist is, which would your 2 be?
I'm gonna Intimacies for sure. I'm looking at my list now. Intimacies for sure is mine to I do think I want to say Matrix, but I'm not gonna do that just because. But I guess that you and I are probably. But you know what? I don't know. I think the love songs of W.E.B. Du Bois really, I think it has a fighting chance.
Yes. I think that if I were picking three, it would be Intimacies, Bewilderment, and the Love Songs of W.E.B. Bois. I think those are my three, like, walking into it. But that being said, the year The Friend by Sigmund Nunez won, that was my favorite book on the list, but I didn't think it had any chance of winning that year.
Mhm.
So who knows, what will actually win. Sometimes I definitely feel like these judging panels pick a book to win that's very much for writers. And I think some of the other books are along that line. And so maybe,
Yeah.
that will be, but I do agree. I think if any of those books, actually, if any of the 10 of these books won, I would not be actually sad.
Yeah. I'm pretty, yeah. This is a pretty good list. So I'm good.
Well, so Hunter and I will be back to discuss the short list and pick our winner from that list. Hopefully the books that we want to see there will be there. But if they're not, then we'll have to figure out what we want to do there. And yeah, no, this was a fantastic reading experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Hunter, as always, thank you so much for being on my channel. Thank you. I know it's like the middle of the day there in where you live. So I appreciate you taking time out of your day.
No, always. Thank you for having me.
And we will be back. So until next time, Hunter and I wish you happy reading. Bye, everyone.
Bye.